friends, welcome back to my channel. Today is an oh so exciting video because it is my 2021 favorite books video. I had a really great reading year. It definitely opened up after graduating and I had much more free time to read than I've had in a long time, so it was great in that way. To begin, let's start with some statistics because I used the Cawpile rating sheet. I will link the original Cawpile rating system or the, I think, new updated version that has recently come out in the description. But yes, I used that to track my reading last year, and yeah, let's look at some interesting stats that I have compiled, at least interesting to me, hopefully to you as well. I read a grand total of 69 books this past year. Nice. Was it intentional? Maybe a little at the end. I really thought I was gonna get to 70, but it's okay. In terms of format, I primarily read physical copies. I read 69.6% of the books. Again, nice. Of the books that I read this year were in physical format. In second place, we have, of course, audiobooks at 18.8%, and then I read 11.6% ebooks this year, which this stat doesn't surprise me at all. I do read audiobooks pretty frequently, however, I tend to prefer physical format always. Audiobooks give me a nice little break. I feel like this year, though, something that I really fell into doing a lot was reading a book both physically and with the audiobook and just switching between them. I find it kind of refreshing. If you get tired of one format, you can always continue in the other and just take breaks, and it's a nice reading experience. For genres, I was kind of surprised by my top genre this year, which was the graphic novel, which I guess you could argue between it being a genre and a format, but in this calculation it was considered a genre and therefore took up 18.8% of the books that I read this year. That means about 1 in 5 of the books I read was a graphic novel, which is pretty cool. My second top genre was fantasy at 14.5% of the books that I read, and finally in third place, tied for third place actually, we have contemporary and nonfiction at 10.1%. Contemporary I'm not surprised by, but nonfiction really took off for me this year, and I really do enjoy a good nonfiction novel, and I'm proud of myself. Partly, I think a good deal of that also came from readings I did for school, but also reading nonfiction on my free time. That was a big move for me this year, and it was a good one. I like that. Finally, in terms of star ratings, I seem to be a pretty generous rating giver. I definitely gave the most 5-star ratings out of any other rating this year. I rated 34.8% of the books that I read 5 stars, 30.4% 4 stars. So I guess I'm being a little bit nice to my books. Too nice? I don't know. I do feel I gave pretty fair ratings to the books that I read this year based on how I felt about them. So I guess I just had a good reading year. Now on to the actual favorites. I have picked out 10 of the 69 books that I read this year as the best that I read, that stood out to me, that I definitely recommend to pretty much anybody. In no particular order, let's begin. I'm going to tell you the book, a brief synopsis, and my favorite thing about the book. First, we have the Malediction trilogy by Daniel L. Jensen. This is the first book, Stolen Songbird. Can't really pick a favorite. I think my favorite for this just stands as the trilogy as a whole, because I just had so much fun with this trilogy this year. This first book follows our protagonist, Cecile, who basically gets stolen under a mountain and discovers the secret troll society within the mountain, and these trolls think that she is the key to their prophecy that is going to break the spell that holds them underneath the mountain. But, you know, she ends up not necessarily seeing these trolls as villains. Maybe there's like an enemies to lovers situation type going on, I don't really know. And it is just so much fun. My favorite thing about this series is the ultimately just so endearing characters. All of them have a little tiny piece of your heart, and they just feel wholesome, but they work. They just work so well. And the plot sucks you in. That's technically, I guess, my second favorite thing. But yeah, the plot sucks you in with this. I think that even if there is a slow moment, the conversations between the characters carry the plot forward so well that I was never really bored when reading any part of this trilogy. So yeah, highly recommend. This is a super fun YA fantasy trilogy that I think many people would love. The next book is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I feel like everybody knows about this book at this point. It definitely met the hype for me. I really enjoyed this book. It follows a woman named Nora who on the night that she decides to commit suicide, she ends up in this library before death, where she has the opportunity to kind of just try on different lives that she would have had if she'd made one decision differently. And if she is perfectly content in any of those lives, then she can stay in it. And my favorite thing about this book is that it does exactly what you want it to do. It doesn't parade as something else. It's not like one of those books where you go into it and it takes you by surprise. This is one where you want it to do what you think it's going to do, and then once it does, it's very satisfying, and it kind of all wraps up with a bow on top, and I really love it about that. I really love it because of that. For sure, trigger warnings for suicide, for depression, but I think that the perspective that Matt Haig gives in here as a person who has dealt with those experiences in his own life is really valuable, and I think that Nora is a really good lens to see through in that. Nora as a character didn't necessarily stand out to me, but the idea of this book as a whole is really what makes it so special, in my opinion. Next, we have People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This is her newest book that has come out. It is a friends to lovers romance about Poppy and Alex, who have been friends since college, since they went on a road trip together, and they used to go on yearly summer vacations together, until one year where they have a mysterious falling out that you don't really know what happened until the end of the book. And the book is kind of told in like alternating timelines from their previous vacations to their current moment, in which Poppy invites Alex to go on one more vacation to try and mend their friendship. And maybe there's some sexual tension, I don't know. My absolute favorite thing about this book is that dang slow burn and the fact that it restored friends to lovers in my heart as something that can be done so well, because this is it, my friends. This is it. If you haven't read a friends to lovers romance that you adore and you don't quite believe in it, you don't think it really can be done to its full intention, then look no further. This can do it for you. I pretty much promise. I mean, maybe it doesn't do it for everybody, but hopefully most people. Along the same line, the next book that I have is Beach Read by Emily Henry, which of course I read before People We Meet on Vacation. So you could say I really discovered Emily Henry this year, and she's easily one of my new favorite authors. I will read anything that she comes out with at this point. Beach Read is about a woman named January who is a romance author, and she is definitely experiencing a very strong writer's block, and so she goes to She retreats to her father's lake house, and she goes there to try and fix her writer's block, but she figures out that her neighbor is her college writing rival, Gus, and there's an interesting relationship that blooms out of that. My favorite thing about this book is not the romance, it's actually January. January is such a strong main character, and I think I inserted myself into her perspective, and it really worked for me. This is a protagonist who is definitely not surface level. She has so many deeper emotions going on that are so realistically worked through in this book. So it's not just a romance novel. I mean, it primarily is. Yes, you're going to get a very steamy, lovely romance in here that is so great, but you also get a main character who is full of so much life and is dealing with so much grief and so much confusion in her life that she has to go through and figure out, and the way that it's portrayed is wonderful. So if I had to pick a favorite between those two books, it's Beach Read, fine. The next book that I have to talk about is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This is another book that I think everybody and their dog knows about and understands why people love it, but it follows an old man named Linus who is working in a desk job for the department in charge of magical youth, and he basically writes case reports on these orphanages that hold magical youths in their society and gets to determine whether or not they're being run properly, whether they should be run better. One day he gets summoned to write a case report on this island with 6 very dangerous dangerous magical children. And he is basically the person who is going to determine their fate as an orphanage. And the thing that I love most about this book is the clarity in its intentions. I think for me, this one is a lot like The Midnight Library in that you know what it's gonna do. You are prepared for where the plot is going. And just seeing it executed is satisfying. You don't need extra plot twists to make it interesting. You just need it to do what it's supposed to do, and it does it. And I think that TJ Klune's writing style in this book also supports that, and that it's just so direct. Sometimes he's not excessively wordy, he's not super like flowery with what he says, he just gives you a line and tells you the message of the book. And I think in some books that isn't the way to go, but in this one, it made a lot of sense, and it just works. It really, really does. This book is like sitting in your favorite chair and eating a snickerdoodle or your cookie of choice. But for me, it feels like a snickerdoodle or a sugar cookie because that's what would make me feel super warm and nice inside. And this book is lovely. Just give it a shot. Next, I've got Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. This was also the year of Toni Morrison for me. Mostly because I took a class on Toni Morrison, so I had to read most of these just for a class about her, which was great. It was such an experience getting to just fully deep dive on this author, and she's incredible. It was definitely difficult to choose a favorite out of the books that I've read by her so far, but this is for sure the standout for me of what I've read from her so far. Song of Solomon is about a man named Milkman Dead, who basically has to discover who he is. He's grown up kind of in his father's shadow his whole life, just kind of accepting what his father wants him to do. And this is his journey of just breaking away from that, and he kind of goes on an actual physical journey of discovery of his heritage and where his family came from. I always struggle to give a compelling synopsis of this book because whenever I describe it like that, it doesn't sound interesting at all. But it is phenomenal. It comes to life off the page. And I think, therefore, my favorite thing about this book is that sprinkle of magic and the writing that just, it lifts this story into being something unforgettable. I wish I could find the perfect way to make everybody so interested in this book that they pick it up immediately, but I haven't found it yet. So hopefully I said something that made you want to read this book because it is incredible and I highly recommend it to everybody. Next we have the Heartstopper series by Alice Oseman. Since my top genre of 2021 was graphic novels, obviously, I probably should have one of my favorites demonstrating that genre as a whole. And Heartstopper was absolutely my favorite graphic novel series that I read this year. It is about two boys, Nick and Charlie, as they are coming into themselves, and it's both a coming-of-age story and a love story that takes place in their high school years. My favorite things about this series are, one, just the warmth. Just like the sensation that you get while reading these books is just indescribable. I couldn't stop smiling while I was reading them, and I think that really speaks for the series as a whole. I haven't read the most recent volume, but I've read all of the other ones and they are fantastic. The hype for this series is so well deserved. The next title is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. I've definitely talked about this book quite a few times already. This is my favorite nonfiction book that I read this year. It is basically what it sounds like exactly. It's a compilation of studies, anecdotes, testimonies, and just statistics that inform you about sleep and why we as humans need sleep and why our society depriving us of it is deeply troubling and something that we should all be a little bit more concerned with. And my favorite thing about this book is that it restored my respect for sleep, and sleep is now one of the things that I value most in my life, and getting it full 8 hours at night is just like it's a cornerstone. You gotta have it. You gotta do it. And Matthew Walker lays out this book so well. It is so easily digestible. I think that it is not something inaccessible. Anybody could read this and gain so much from it. So yeah, it's fabulous. Next, I want to talk about A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. And in that, I mean pretty much the Shades of Magic series as a whole. However, the last book, Conjuring of Light, is my favorite, so I am saying that one because it was just too good. It was just a perfect finale that really did everything I wanted to do for the series. The first book, A Darker Shade of Magic, follows a man named Kel who is an Antari in a world where there are multiple Londons that only Antari can travel between using blood magic, and Kel basically has to travel between worlds to serve as like an ambassador, but also maybe something more happens. He has to deal with some dangerous things. And my favorite thing about this series is the characters. Even when the plot is slow, the second book, the banter between the characters drives everything and makes you want to continue even when the plot slows down, and that is something really, really special. These characters feel larger than life to me. They feel like real people that are in my life. If you want to be swept off on an adventure with assassins, pirates, magic, and tournaments, and multiple worlds, then look no further. This series is your sweet spot. You need to read it. It's great. I know I didn't rank any of the previous books that I just talked about, but finally, I do want to talk about my favorite book of the year. This book just stole the show for me. It's one of those books that I really knew I was gonna love, and I was just so excited to read it. And it actually delivered on everything that I thought it was going to be. And that is We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Berry. This book is about a high school field hockey team in the town of Danvers, Massachusetts, where the author actually attended high school, which is, that's her. And this field hockey team starts tapping into dark magic with this demon named Emilio to attempt to win their games. If that sounds ridiculous to you, I promise you it's more ridiculous on the page, and in the best way. It's really hard to pick a favorite thing about this book, so I'll say several. First of all, the genre bending. It's not just a contemporary, it's not necessarily a magical realism, it's not necessarily historical fiction. It's like, it's its own little thing that really can't be put into a box, and I love it for that. Another of my for sure favorite things about it is the level of detail in this writing. It's not for the faint-hearted. You for sure need to pay attention when you read this book, because one line packs so much of a punch, and you can read it 3 times and still get more from it each time. And I say that in the most comical way. A sentence in this book can be simultaneously so serious in what it's saying and also so ridiculously funny. There is such a huge cast of characters in this book. I believe it's like, what, 13 girls on this field hockey team? And it seems very intimidating at first, getting to know that many characters, but you really do. Like, this book does it so well. You really get to see from each character's perspective, and it alternates between them. And by the end of the book, I love them all. I love them all so much. This book is a masterpiece. If I could convince everybody to read this book, I would. And that's it. Alrighty, those were all of my favorite books that I read in 2021. I would love to hear what yours were. Let's just obsess over our new favorite books together, shall we? Thanks for tuning into this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!